This is a story about a quiet encounter on the side of a Kentucky highway where a wealthy man's broken-down car became the doorway to a boy's forgotten legacy. It's about a retired executive named Owen Carter and a 14-year-old named Jaylen Brooks, whose simple act of kindness would spark a journey into the past neither of them expected. What begins with a flat tire slowly unravels into something much deeper, something neither man nor boy could walk away from unchanged. The late July heat shimmered off the asphalt as Owen Carter sat in his BMW, parked awkwardly on the shoulder of a quiet Kentucky highway. The flat tire had come out of nowhere, a soft lurch, followed by the thudding realization that he was far from any roadside service. No signal, no traffic, just the hum of cicadas and the stale blast of AC on his face. He tapped his wedding ring against the steering wheel, the sound sharp, rhythmic, impatient. He was 72 now, retired for nearly a decade. A man once feared in boardrooms, now helpless with a jack and no cell bars. He leaned his head back and let out a sigh heavy with pride and frustration. That's when he saw the boy. Walking alone down the dusty shoulder, sneakers kicking up dust, was a teenager, maybe 13, 14 at most. Baggy, sun-faded t-shirt, jeans, a size too big, a canvas backpack slung over one shoulder. He had the look of someone used to the road, not lost, just moving through it. The boy slowed as he reached the car, eyes scanning the flat tire before looking at Owen through the passenger window. "Looks like a flat," the boy said simply, not unkind. Owen gave a tight nod, trying to keep a guarded edge. "Yeah. No signal. Was hoping someone might pass by." "I can help," the boy said without hesitation. "My uncle taught me how to change one." Before Owen could respond, the boy walked to the trunk like he'd done this a dozen times. Owen popped it open, half out of curiosity, half stunned by the confidence in the kid's voice. From the rearview mirror, Owen watched the boy crouch down, inspect the damage, retrieve the spare and the tools, and begin working with quiet efficiency. No small talk, no delay, just focused movement. Something about it hit Owen square in the chest. "You do this often?" he asked through the open window. "Sometimes," the boy replied, not looking up. "People get stuck out here a lot." He paused, then glancing briefly toward Owen. "You from around here?" Owen hesitated. "Used to be. Long time ago." The boy gave a slight nod and turned back to the tire. In that moment, something flickered across his face like recognition, though Owen couldn't place it. Within 15 minutes, it was done. The boy wiped his hands on the back of his jeans and gave a small, satisfied smile. "All good, sir." Owen reached into his wallet and pulled out 2 crisp 20s. "Here. I appreciate the help." But the boy stepped back, hands up politely. "No need, sir. I'm just happy to help." Owen stared, hands still extended, surprised by the refusal. "You sure?" "I'm sure." With that, the boy gave a small wave and continued down the road, disappearing into the heat haze like he'd never been there. Owen sat there for a moment, wallet still open, hands still raised. He couldn't explain it, but something about the boy's presence lingered, something unspoken. As he drove back toward his estate on the edge of town, Owen kept catching glimpses of the boy in the rearview mirror of his mind. The confidence, the quiet dignity, the way he handled a situation without fanfare, without need for praise or payment. Something about him scratched at the edges of Owen's memory. Something familiar. It wasn't until later that night, sitting alone in his high-ceilinged study, filled with dusty books and polished furniture, that Owen realized what it was. The boy had reminded him of himself. Not the man he had become, but the boy he used to be. The boy from Harlan. The boy with grease under his nails and dreams in his head long before suits and corner offices and retirement parties. He stood, walked over to an old filing cabinet, and opened a drawer he hadn't touched in years. Inside, beneath a stack of faded photographs and forgotten blueprints, was a worn envelope labeled Carter Motors, personal. His hands trembled slightly as he pulled it out. There, among the sketches and notes, was a picture of a young mechanic, dark-skinned in overalls, standing beside Owen as a much younger man. And next to the photo, scrawled in pencil, prototype design. B. Brooks. Owen froze. Brooks. He closed the folder slowly, then looked out the window into the darkness. Who was that boy really? And why did he look like someone from a past Owen thought he'd buried? The photo haunted him. Owen didn't sleep that night. He left the envelope open on his desk, the name B. Brooks staring back at him like a question he wasn't ready to answer. He had locked that chapter of his life away decades ago. The factory floor, the oil-stained hands, the prototype that was never finished. He hadn't thought about Bernard Brooks in over 30 years. But now, a boy with the same last name, the same sharp eyes, the same quiet way of moving through the world. It couldn't be coincidence. At sunrise, Owen made coffee, poured it into a travel mug, and got in his car. He didn't shave, didn't change his shirt, just drove back toward Harlan. He hadn't set foot there in nearly 40 years. Last time he came, his father was being buried. After that, he never looked back. He'd made his name in Lexington, then New York, and finally built his financial empire in Chicago. Harlan was a place he had buried like a box in the dirt, something you walk away from and pretend never existed. But as the winding roads led him deeper into the Appalachians, he felt something shift inside. Not dread, not quite nostalgia either. More like a faint ache, like pressing a thumb into a healed wound. The town looked smaller than he remembered. The old Texaco station was gone. The grocery store was now a Family Dollar. But the houses, those still stood. Crooked porches, chipped siding, mismatched curtains in the windows. He rolled down his window, taking in the morning air. Wood smoke, pine, the faint trace of bacon from some kitchen he couldn't see. He didn't know exactly where he was going, only that he needed to find the boy. The road where they met had to be a few miles west of town. He retraced his steps, slowing at gas stations, diners, even a roadside fruit stand. At each place, he described the boy around 14, smart, polite, good with tools. Most people just shook their heads or gave half-hearted answers. Until the fourth stop. A weathered woman at a cafe counter blinked slowly, then nodded. "Sounds like Jaylen Brooks," she said, brushing flour from her apron. "Helps out all over. Lives with his mama out near Mill Creek Road. Yellow house with the peeling mailbox." Owen scribbled the address, like it was a secret map to buried treasure. As he pulled up to the house 20 minutes later, he felt his throat tighten. It was a modest place, weather-beaten, yes, but tidy. A little vegetable garden grew along the side. A half-mended fence leaned against a shed out back. And on the front porch, sitting on a worn step with a glass of tea, was the boy, Jaylen. His eyes widened slightly as he saw Owen step out of the car. "Hey," he said, standing up slowly. "Didn't expect to see you again." "I didn't expect to be back," Owen admitted, his voice quieter than usual. "But I needed to say thank you and ask a few things." Jaylen gave a small shrug. "Sure. You want to come inside?" Owen hesitated, but then the screen door creaked open, and a woman in her early 40s appeared. She wore a faded t-shirt, hair pulled back in a loose bun. Her eyes were sharp, measured, protective. "Can I help you?" she asked carefully. "I met your son yesterday," Owen said, clearing his throat. "He helped me with a flat tire. Wouldn't take a dime." She glanced at Jaylen, then back to Owen. Her face softened a little. "That sounds like him. I just wanted to thank him properly," Owen continued. "And maybe talk, if that's all right." She paused, then nodded. "We don't have much, but you're welcome to sit a spell." Inside the house smelled like cinnamon and something baking. The living room was small, but lived in, a sagging couch, a few framed pictures, a stack of library books on the coffee table. Jaylen sat on the floor beside a toolbox, fiddling with something Owen couldn't see. A schematic? No, a hand-drawn diagram of an engine system. Owen blinked. "Where'd you get that?" he asked, pointing to the paper. Jaylen turned it toward him. I'm trying to figure out how older models vent pressure differently. This one's based on a design my mom found in a junk shop. It had Carter Motors stamped in the corner. Kinda cool, right? Owen's breath caught. Can I see it? Jaylen handed it over, and Owen recognized the lines instantly. The pressure release valve the curved chassis supported was his. His old prototype. One he never finished. One that was supposed to revolutionize fuel efficiency for working-class pickups. The design had disappeared when he left Harlan. Or so he thought. He looked up at Jaylen. Where exactly did your mom find this? In a box of old manuals, Jaylen said. Someone dropped them off at the church donation center last year. I've been piecing stuff together since then. Before Owen could speak again, the front door opened. Jaylen's mom stepped in with a basket of laundry. She glanced at the diagram in Owen's hands. Oh, that thing, she said. Jaylen's obsessed. Says it's the only design he's seen where the math actually works clean. She paused. There was a name scribbled on the back of one of the pages. I think it said, B. Brooks. Owen's fingers tightened around the page. His mind raced. Bernard Brooks. The man who worked beside him in the shop. The one with ideas no one listened to because of the color of his skin. The one who helped him design that prototype. And now, decades later, a boy with the same last name was holding the blueprint. The blueprint neither of them were ever supposed to see again. Owen sat down slowly, his hands trembling slightly. He looked over at Jaylen, who was watching him with quiet curiosity. What the boy asked. Owen didn't answer right away, because in that moment, one thing had become terrifyingly clear. This wasn't just a chance encounter. This was a door opening to something long buried, and someone had left it unlocked. But who? And why now? Owen stared at the diagram as if it were alive. The lines, the margins, the notations, he could trace each curve from memory. But it wasn't the technicalities that struck him now. It was the signature in faint pencil at the bottom right corner. B. Brooks. He hadn't seen that name in decades. Jaylen sat cross-legged on the floor, elbows, resting on his knees, watching Owen with the quiet patience of someone used to adults getting emotional about things they didn't fully understand. Did you know him? The boy finally asked. Owen blinked, lifted his gaze. Bernard Brooks, he said aloud, as if trying the name out again. Yeah, I knew him. He was brilliant, honest, one of the best damn minds I ever worked with. He paused, looking back down at the page. But nobody listened to him. And eventually, he stopped talking. Jaylen tilted his head slightly. What happened to him? Owen hesitated. His throat tightened. I wish I knew. It wasn't the full truth, but it wasn't a lie either. Bernard had vanished not long after they'd been forced to shelve the prototype. Corporate shut the program down. No budget, they said. No market interest. But Owen remembered the meetings, the subtle remarks, the sudden pressure to replace Bernard on paper, to make the designs more palatable for investors. Then one day, Bernard was gone. No goodbye, no forwarding address, just silence. Jaylen's mother re-entered the room with 2 mugs of coffee and a plate of biscuits. She caught the tension in the air immediately. Everything all right? Owen offered a faint smile. Just catching up with some old ghosts. She sat across from him, folding her hands. You're not just here about a flat tire, are you? No, Owen admitted. I'm here because I think your son is sitting on a legacy he doesn't even know about. Jaylen looked between them. Legacy. Owen leaned forward. You ever think about being an engineer? Jaylen. The boy shrugged a little shy. Yeah. I mean, I mess with stuff all the time. I like figuring out how things work. But college engineering school? We don't have money for that. I'll probably work with my uncle when I'm old enough. Construction or repairs. But what if you could do more? Jaylen blinked. Like what? Owen hesitated. He didn't want to overstep. But part of him, the part that had been asleep for years, was awake now. There are scholarships, mentorship programs, connections I can help with, he said. I'm not here to hand you charity. I'm here to open a door. Jaylen looked down, thoughtful. Then he stood, walked over to a side table, and picked up a framed photo. It was old, faded. A man stood beside a truck in overalls, a wrench in his hand, grease on his cheek, but smiling wide. Jaylen held it up. My grandma said this was my granddad. He died before I was born. She said he worked in a factory. Said he had a lot of ideas, but never got far with them. Owen's heart nearly stopped. It was Bernard. Younger, yes, but unmistakable. He took the frame from Jaylen's hand, staring at the face that once stood beside him at Carter Motors. That's him, Owen whispered. That's Bernard. Jaylen's mom leaned forward. Wait, you knew him personally? Owen nodded slowly. He was my friend. She covered her mouth, eyes wide. Jaylen looked stunned. You really worked together? Owen looked up at the boy, voice low. We built the prototype together. We were going to change how engines handled fuel efficiency. It was revolutionary for its time. So what happened? Jaylen asked. Owen's jaw tightened. People didn't want to see it happen, especially not with Bernard's name on it. There was silence. Then Jaylen spoke, voice quieter than before. Is that why no one ever talks about him? Owen didn't answer, because that was the moment he realized something even darker. If the diagram survived, if Jaylen somehow had the only existing copy, then someone must have tried to erase the others. Not just forget Bernard, but actively erase his work. Why? And why leave this one behind? Jaylen placed the frame back and sat down again, a strange weight in his eyes. I want to finish what he started, he said. I don't know how yet, but I want to. Owen nodded. Then I'll help. Just then, a car horn blared from outside. Everyone flinched. Jaylen moved to the window and peeked through the curtains. A black SUV idled on the other side of the street. Tinted windows, engine humming. Do you know them? Owen asked. Jaylen shook his head. Never seen that car before. They watched as it sat there for a full minute, then slowly rolled down the road and disappeared around the corner. Jaylen's mom locked the front door. Owen's hands trembled again, but this time, not from memory. He felt something tighten in his gut. This wasn't just about a flat tire. This was about something bigger, something that still made people nervous enough to sit and watch a small house on the edge of Harlan. He looked back at Jaylen. Do you still have the rest of the documents? Jaylen nodded. I hid them in the attic. Owen stood suddenly alert. Keep them safe. Don't talk to anyone else about them. Not yet. Jaylen frowned. You think someone's looking for them? Owen didn't answer. Because deep down, he already knew the truth. And someone else out there might know it too. Jaylen didn't ask again. He just nodded a little slower than before and disappeared up the creaking attic ladder, while Owen stood silently by the front window, watching the street where the black SUV had been moments ago. Outside, nothing moved, just the breeze nudging the old mailbox and a few birds skipping across the fence. But Owen knew better. That car wasn't there by accident. It was the kind of car used by people who wanted to be forgotten, but still seen. People who didn't knock, didn't ask, didn't explain. A long breath passed through his lips. Jaylen returned a minute later with a cardboard shoebox duct tape wrapped around its edges like bandages. He set it on the floor, wiped the dust off the lid, and opened it carefully. Inside were stacks of old diagrams, faded papers, mechanical sketches, yellowed newspaper clippings, and at the very bottom, an old USB flash drive. Where did you find this? Owen asked, crouching beside him. In the same box, Jaylen replied. It was stuck under the lining. Owen picked it up. It was scratched, but intact. The brand was old, discontinued for over a decade. He weighed it in his hand like it might still hold the weight of everything Bernard once dreamed. Have you plugged it in? He asked. Jaylen shook his head. Didn't want to break it. Figured if it was important, I should wait. Owen smiled, faintly impressed by the boy's caution. Good instincts. He glanced up at Jaylen's mother, who was now sitting on the edge of the couch, arms crossed, brows drawn tight. Do you have a laptop? Owen asked. She stood, disappeared into the back room, and returned with an old HP wrapped in a charger cord. "Still works, but slow," she muttered, setting it on the coffee table. The screen flickered to life, the familiar hum of age groaning beneath the keys. Owen inserted the USB and waited. A folder popped up. Brooks' Final Revision, 2008. He clicked. Inside were dozens of files, schematics test reports, cost-saving analysis fuel efficiency graphs, and a final presentation titled Carter Motors, Prototype 6C, Confidential. Owen's stomach turned. He remembered this folder, not because he'd seen it, but because it had been missing. When Bernard disappeared, he had assumed the documents were taken with him. But here they were, untouched, forgotten, hidden in a shoebox above a boy's bedroom. He opened the presentation. The numbers were pristine, years ahead of its time. A small truck engine capable of achieving 37 miles per gallon on rough terrain without sacrificing torque or durability. Owen sat back, jaw slightly open. This could have changed everything, he whispered. Jaylen watched him closely. Why didn't it? Owen's voice was rough. Because when a black engineer in 2008 presents a design too advanced, too disruptive, and too public, it threatens more than just the market. It threatens the people who built the market. Jaylen's mom let out a quiet breath. You think they buried it? I think Owen said they erased him. He closed the laptop slowly. We can't let this sit in a shoebox anymore. Jaylen nodded. Then, what do we do? Before Owen could answer, he noticed a line of numbers in the folder's metadata coordinates. He opened the file labeled 6C, testlog.txt. At the top was a line of text: performed Red Hollow Quarry, July 2nd, 2008. Witness present. Owen's pulse quickened. He knew Red Hollow. It was an old quarry north of town, long shut down. If Bernard had taken the prototype there to test, there might still be evidence, videos, a test vehicle, something. But more than that, witness present. That meant someone else had seen what happened. And maybe someone else knew why it ended. Jaylen leaned over his shoulder. You think it's still there? Maybe not the truck, Owen said, but records are journal tools. Even scrap metal could prove it existed. Jaylen stood up. Let's go. Owen hesitated. Now, Jaylen said firmly. I don't want to wait until another car shows up outside our house. Jaylen's mom looked between them, then nodded. Be careful. An hour later, they stood at the edge of Red Hollow Quarry. The wind whistled low through the weeds. A rusted-out gate hung by a single hinge. On the far side, the land sloped down into what used to be a gravel pit, now overgrown and partially filled with stagnant water. Abandoned scaffolding leaned into the brush, and tire tracks, long since hardened into the ground, still marked the clay. Jaylen pointed to the far ridge. That looks like a test path. They followed it, stepping over brambles and broken boards, until they found a collapsed wooden structure. Beside it, half buried in dirt and leaves, was a large plastic storage bin. Jaylen pried it open. Inside were rusted tools, notebooks sealed in plastic, and a metal panel stamped with CM6C test unit. Owen crouched beside it, breath caught in his throat. It's real, he whispered. It all happened. Jaylen flipped through one of the notebooks. His fingers paused on a page with a sketch of the same diagram they'd seen earlier. Only this one had a signature at the bottom, not Bernard's, but another name entirely. M.R. Wallace, Test Observer. Owen froze. Wallace. He knew that name. Michael Raymond Wallace had been on Carter Motors' board of directors when the prototype program was killed. And after Bernard vanished, Wallace was promoted. Jaylen looked up. You okay? Owen nodded slowly, eyes narrowing. He was there. Jaylen frowned. The witness? Yeah, Owen muttered. But if he was the witness, then why has he never spoken about it? Jaylen stared down at the notebook in his hands. And Owen looked back toward the road where the SUV hadn't reappeared yet, but now felt closer than ever. Something told him they weren't the only ones who knew about this place, and they'd better move fast. because someone else might be looking for these pages. And the last time Bernard never got the chance to finish what he started. The ride back from Red Hollow was quiet, but Owen's mind was a storm. The name Wallace echoed louder than the gravel beneath the tires. He hadn't thought about Michael Raymond Wallace in years, not since the boardroom days at Carter Motors. But now, everything clicked into place. Wallace had been there, at the prototype's death. Wallace had been the one who called for strategic pivots. Wallace had erased Bernard, and somehow Bernard's grandson had unearthed it all. Owen glanced sideways at Jaylen, who sat in the passenger seat, gripping the test notebook like it was made of glass. There was a determination in the boy's eyes, one Owen remembered seeing in a much younger Bernard. That hunger to build, to fix, to understand. "We need to talk to him," Jaylen said, breaking the silence. Jaylen nodded. "If he saw the test, he knows the truth. He needs to say it out loud." Owen tightened his grip on the steering wheel. "He won't. Not willingly. Then we make him." The way Jaylen said it, it didn't come from anger. It came from something deeper, a quiet sense of justice. Back at the house, Jaylen's mom stood on the porch, arms crossed, a nervous look on her face. "There's a message on the answering machine," she said as they walked up. "No name. Just said, 'Tell Owen Carter to stop digging.'" Owen froze mid-step. Jaylen looked at him. "They know your name." Owen gave a slow nod. They always did. Inside, he replayed the message. It was a man's voice, filtered and distorted. The phrasing was clipped, measured, corporate. "They're watching," Owen said. "We need to move carefully now." Jaylen tapped the notebook. "Wallace. Where is he?" Owen hesitated. "He retired 3 years ago. Moved to a private development in Atlanta. Gated, discreet. The kind of place where people like him go to forget." Jaylen sat on the edge of the couch. "Can we get in?" Owen gave a tight smile. "With the right invitation. Maybe." That night, Owen made a call he hadn't made in over a decade. To an old colleague, someone still on the edge of the industry. He kept it vague, said he was working on a legacy piece, something to honor old automotive innovators. "I need access to Wallace," Owen said. "Just an introduction." There was a long pause. Then, "You're walking into old fire, Owen. You sure I'm already burning?" The next morning, they were on the road. The subdivision in Atlanta was, as Owen remembered, sterile, pristine, and soulless. White stucco walls, manicured lawns, silent guards behind mirrored glass. He used the pretense of a business visit to get through the gate, flashing an ID badge from a company he hadn't worked at in years. It still worked. Wallace's house was perched on a corner lot, shaded by a line of oak trees. A sleek black sedan sat in the driveway. Jaylen stayed in the car, while Owen walked up alone and knocked. A moment passed. Then the door opened, and there he was. Older, thinner, but unmistakably the same man. "Mr. Wallace," Owen said, extending a hand. Wallace looked at him, confused at first. Then his eyes narrowed. "Owen Carter," he said slowly. "Well, that's a name I haven't heard in a long time. May I come in?" Wallace hesitated, but something in Owen's tone must have registered. He stepped aside. They sat in a pale living room that smelled faintly of expensive leather and artificial pine. Wallace poured a drink, but didn't offer Owen one. "What brings you to my door after all these years?" he asked, voice neutral. "I found the prototype," Owen said. "The one from Red Hollow. The 6C. Wallace didn't flinch, but his hand tightened around the glass. "Ah," he said quietly. "That." Owen reached into his bag and placed the test log on the coffee table. Wallace stared at it for a long time, unmoving. "You were there," Owen said. "Your name's on the file. You saw it work." Still no response. "You watched Bernard run that engine. You saw the data. And then you buried it." Wallace finally spoke. "It wasn't my decision." Bull, Owen snapped. "You were on the board. You signed off on the cancellation. There were pressures, lawsuits, patent conflicts, investors who didn't want disruption. There was a man," Owen growled, "who had a son, who had a grandson, and that grandson found every page you tried to erase. Wallace looked up sharply. What Owen didn't blink. His name is Jaylen. He's 14, and he's smarter than all of us. Wallace's jaw twitched. You brought him here. No, Owen lied. But he's the reason I'm here. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Wallace sat back, the weight of something old pressing into his shoulders. I didn't know Bernard had a child, he said. He didn't. Jaylen's his grandson. His daughter died young. The boy was raised by his mother. Lives in Harlan. Wallace's face shifted. Not guilt, something closer to discomfort. I was told everything was destroyed. Clearly not. Another pause. Wallace leaned forward. So, what now? You want me to go public, admit we suppressed a design for over a decade, risk everything I've built for a dead man's truth? Owen stood. No. I want you to sign your name. On the record. That you saw it work. That it was real. That Bernard Brooks deserved credit. Wallace didn't move. If you don't, Owen said, Jaylen will find someone else who will. Wallace stared at him for a long, trembling second. Then slowly, he nodded. I'll write a statement, he said. But after that, I want nothing more to do with it. Owen nodded once. Fair. As he turned to leave, Wallace called out, Owen! He stopped. There's a file, Wallace said. Locked archive. Company server. Hidden under a legacy folder code name, Roosevelt Ghost. It was the last full spec before they wiped the logs. If Jaylen really wants to finish this, he'll need that file. Owen said nothing. He walked back to the car where Jaylen waited, face tense. Well, the boy asked. Owen handed him the statement. Wallace's signature glistened in blue ink at the bottom. Jaylen smiled. But then he noticed something else. A deep line between Owen's brows. What is it? Owen looked ahead, eyes narrowing. Roosevelt Ghost, he muttered. Whatever that file is, it's buried for a reason. Jaylen leaned back in his seat, the weight of legacy growing heavier on his shoulders. The car pulled away from the gated community, but neither of them saw the black SUV 2 blocks down. Parked, engine off, watching, waiting. Jaylen spotted the SUV first. They were back on the highway heading north, the Atlanta skyline shrinking behind them. Owen had just pulled into a quiet rest stop to grab coffee when Jaylen, peering out the rear window, froze. It's here, he said, voice low. Owen didn't ask what. He knew. The same black SUV, same tinted windows, parked diagonally across the lot, engine still running. Owen followed Jaylen's gaze, his stomach nodding. They'd shaken the vehicle hours ago, or so they thought. But here it was, again like a shadow they couldn't outrun. Stay in the car, Owen muttered. He stepped out, casually stretched his arms, walked toward the gas station's doors. As he passed a parked sedan, he risked a glance back. The SUV hadn't moved, but he could feel eyes sharp and unblinking. He didn't go inside. Instead, he ducked around the building and came up behind the SUV from an angle. But as he approached it, pulled out slowly, deliberately, and vanished back onto the road. When he returned to the car, Jaylen was gripping the prototype log, his knuckles white. This isn't about a patent anymore, is it? The boy asked. No, Owen said. It's about what it threatens. And who? Jaylen looked out the window, face unreadable. But Owen could tell this was no longer just about his grandfather. It was about every time someone like Bernard was erased, every design left unbuilt, every voice dismissed before it could finish a sentence. They drove in silence for a while, until Owen took a sharp turn off the main road. Where are we going? Jaylen asked. To my house. He hadn't intended to bring Jaylen there. Not yet. But the presence of that SUV, the creeping sense of danger, the magnitude of what they now held, it changed everything. They needed a safe place. And they needed to think. An hour later, they pulled up to a sprawling property on the edge of Lexington. Owen's estate looked like it had been lifted from a real estate catalog. Tall windows, a wide porch, landscaped lawns. But Jaylen barely noticed the wealth. His eyes were drawn to something else entirely. The garage. Owen opened the side door, revealing what looked more like a lab than a storage space. Shelves of tools, half-assembled projects, dusty blueprints pinned to corkboards. On one side stood a rusted frame of a vintage truck stripped down to its bones. Jaylen's mouth fell open. "You built all this?" Owen nodded. "Stopped working on it after I retired. Too many distractions. Not enough heart." Jaylen walked over to a rack of engine parts, running his fingers over the cool metal. Then he turned. "Can we rebuild it?" Owen blinked. "What the prototype?" Jaylen held up the test log. "We have the specs, the files, and now a place to work." Owen smiled faintly. "You think you can finish what your grandfather started?" Jaylen didn't hesitate. "No, we can." And so they began. The next several days passed in a blur. Owen contacted a few trusted names, engineers from his past, retired mechanics, one former Carter Motors technician who owed him a favor. No names were given, no files were shared, just measurements, tools, and parts delivered without questions. Jaylen, to Owen's amazement, was tireless. He soaked up everything: how to measure tolerances, how to grind welds, how to calibrate valve timing. Owen hadn't taught like this in decades, but it all came back: the rhythm of instruction, the click of understanding in a student's eyes. They worked by day, reviewed files by night. Wallace's statement gave them legal footing, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. The missing puzzle piece remained: the Roosevelt ghost file. Owen had once overseen Carter Motors' digital architecture. With the right backdoor credentials, ones he still remembered, he might be able to find it. That night, while Jaylen slept on a makeshift cot in the garage, Owen stayed up in his office. He booted up an encrypted virtual machine, typed in a sequence of legacy login credentials, and slipped into the company's ancient archive. After several hours of digging through dead links and obsolete directories, he found it. Legacy, design, prototype, 6C, Roosevelt's ghost. Zip. His hand hovered over the mouse. Click. The file downloaded. Inside, final schematics, a marketing rollout plan, internal emails. But what chilled Owen most was a memo dated August 12, 2008, subject line: suppression protocol. Immediate action required. It was an internal directive. Carter Motors had formally instructed legal and PR teams to erase all public trace of Bernard Brooks' work. The memo was signed by 3 board members. Wallace was one of them. But the final name made Owen's blood run cold: Martin E. Carter, the founder's grandson, and Owen's former protege. The betrayal ran deeper than he'd imagined. He printed the memo, put it in a folder, sealed it. The next morning, Jaylen was already up adjusting torque on a mounting bracket. Owen handed him the folder without a word. Jaylen opened it, scanned the contents, then looked up. His voice was a whisper. They really tried to erase him. Owen nodded. But now, we make sure they can't. Later that afternoon, as the sun dipped low, they stood together beside the truck chassis. It was beginning to take shape, rough, imperfect, but alive. "I want to show you something," Owen said. He led Jaylen into the house, down a hallway lined with dusty frames. He stopped at one. It was a photo, black and white, faded. Bernard and Owen, side by side, smiling. "I never forgot him," Owen said. "I just didn't know how to fight for him back then." Jaylen looked up. "You're doing it now." Owen placed a hand on his shoulder. "You are too." As they turned back toward the garage, a shadow moved behind the trees near the edge of the property. A lens glinted, once, then vanished. Owen didn't see it. Jaylen didn't either. But someone had found them again. And this time, they weren't just watching. The wind shifted just slightly that evening, just enough to carry the faintest sound of a footfall, a twig snapping far beyond the fence line. But neither Owen nor Jaylen noticed. They were too deep in the work, too caught up in the rhythm of legacy being rebuilt bolt by bolt, piece by piece. But the eyes in the dark had seen enough. The next morning, the truck was gone. Not the one they were building. Their truck, the prototype, was still safely locked in the garage. But the old rusted pickup Owen had driven for decades, the one parked near the tree line, Its windshield was smashed, and duct-taped to the driver's side window was a single sheet of paper. No logo, no letterhead, just 6 words printed in bold final warning. "You've gone too far." Owen stood in the gravel driveway, the note crumpled in his shaking hands. His jaw clenched, not out of fear, but rage. Jaylen walked up behind him, silent at first. "We should call someone," the boy finally said. "And tell them what," Owen replied, voice tight. "That we're building an engine from files erased by billion-dollar lawyers. That a boy found blueprints from a man no one remembers. They'll laugh us into the ground." Jaylen looked down. Then slowly, he turned and walked back toward the garage. When Owen followed him inside, he found the boy standing next to the nearly rebuilt 6C prototype, staring at it like it was the only thing anchoring him to solid ground. "We have the files," Jaylen said. "The specs, the test logs, Wallace's statement, the memo. What else do we need?" Owen stared at him. "We need someone who'll listen." Owen didn't have an answer. That night they sat together in the study, blueprints spread across the table, Bernard's original notes beside modern CAD diagrams. A plan was forming, but so were the risks. Jaylen opened his laptop and typed a single phrase into the search bar: tech journalism. Independent. Investigative. He clicked on a link. Nadine Avery, investigative tech correspondent, host of The Disruptors. Her bio was short, but sharp: former engineer turned whistleblower, now known for exposing corporate fraud and giving voices to underdog inventors. "She'll believe us," Jaylen said. Owen raised an eyebrow. "And how do we get her attention?" Jaylen grinned. "We build it." The next 2 weeks blurred into muscle memory and late nights. Welding sparks danced against the garage walls. Coffee went cold on the workbench. Jaylen missed school. Owen missed sleep, but neither of them missed a single step in the process. They worked in silence, but it was a silence heavy with momentum. And on the 15th day, it ran. The 6C roared to life, not in some distant quarry, but right there in Owen's backyard. The hum wasn't perfect. The idle still wobbled. But it moved. It functioned. It breathed. Jaylen stood there, eyes wide, chest heaving. "We did it." Owen placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "No, you did." That night, Jaylen sat at the desk and drafted an email. He attached a video of the engine, the scanned memo, Wallace's signed statement, Bernard's photo, one sentence in the body. "My grandfather built something no one believed in. But I rebuilt it, and now you can't ignore it anymore." He hit send, and they waited. 2 days passed. Then an email reply came through from Nadine Avery, subject: Roosevelt Ghost. "I've been waiting for this story for 15 years. I'm on the next flight to Kentucky." Nadine arrived with a small camera crew, a laptop bag, and the kind of eyes that had seen men lie and companies burn. She asked no small-talk questions. "Just show me." They did. She filmed everything, walked through the garage, captured the engine startup, interviewed Owen and Jaylen in the very living room where Bernard's photo still sat. But it was when Jaylen placed the memo in her hands that she froze. "I've seen versions of this before," she said quietly. "But never this clean. This direct. You just handed me dynamite." By the end of the week, the Disruptors released a 30-minute special titled "The Engine They Tried to Erase." It spread like wildfire. Headlines followed, tweets, think pieces, debates on race innovation, generational theft, calls for Carter Motors to respond, petitions demanding Bernard Brooks' name be restored to the patent registry. Jaylen was suddenly everywhere. But not all attention was good. One night, as Owen was locking up the garage, he found another note shoved beneath the door. This one was handwritten, messy, rushed. "You don't understand what you've started." And beside it, a flash drive. No label, no note. Just a folder titled Bernard.confession.voicemail. They plugged it into Owen's laptop. There was only one audio file. They clicked play. It began with a crackling pause. Then Bernard's voice, shaky but determined. "If something happens to me, it wasn't an accident. They know I won't sign it. They want me gone. And if they get to me, tell my daughter I'm sorry. Tell her I tried." The recording ended. Silence. Jaylen didn't move. Owen leaned back, staring at the screen. "Why did no one ever find this?" the boy whispered. "Because someone made sure they didn't," Owen replied. Jaylen stood, walked out to the garage and stood beside the truck. Owen followed. They looked at it together, what it had cost, what it had revealed, what it now meant. Jaylen turned, eyes burning. "We can't stop here." Owen nodded. "We won't." The camera crew was scheduled to return in a week. But before they did, Owen received a call. Unknown number. He answered. A voice whispered, "If you want to know the truth about Bernard's death, meet me in Chicago. Bring the boy." Then silence. The line went dead. Owen turned slowly. Jaylen stood in the doorway. "Who was it?" Owen looked at him carefully. "I don't know." And then, with a pause, he added, "But I think we're just getting started." If this story moved you, if you believe the past deserves to be heard and the future deserves better, subscribe to our channel. More truths are coming, and Jaylen's journey isn't over.